Good news, everyone! Jaguar D. Saul finally completed his PhD program. He is now officially Dr. Saul. Maybe Dr. Jaguar. That sounds really cool, but the way names work now, he's Dr. Saul. And you know what? You love to see that. It's always great to see somebody, even an older person. Saul is 127 years old. It is never too late to go back to school and finish your degree and follow your dreams. All right, so let's all have a round of applause for Saul there, all right? Back in his days, growing up in the South Blue, he always wanted to be an academic, but he ended up getting drafted into the Marines. I'm not really sure how that went down, but he ended up in the Marines, and he did really good in the Marines. I wonder if the Marines in the One Piece world have like the thing in our world where you can go to college for free or something like that. I don't know how that works, but he ended up becoming a vice admiral in the Marines. That's pretty high standard. But, after the whole mess in Ohara and everything, he decided, you know what, I'm going to study. I'm going to learn. I'm going to go. And I never finished high school. He went back and got his GED. The Giants were helping him through. Vegapunk was tutoring him. Every time Vegapunk stopped by every now and then. I'm sure he stopped by every once in a while. He tutored Saul, got his GED, got his associates, his bachelor's, his master's, and now he has his doctorate. Okay, so at the end of the last chapter, and this is really only apparent in the official Viz version, okay? So at the end of the last chapter, when Robin has her hair cut by Brooke, and it's a really nice, heartwarming, wholesome scene where Robin is really calm, and she's like, I can't wait to see Saul again. Like, she's like staring off at the ocean, approaching ELBAF, and she has this expression on her face of just like peace of mind, like being reunited with a friend that she long was, thinking he was dead. And then in the very, very last panel, it's a giant on ELBAF somewhere running around like, everybody, Dr. Saul has fallen down and he can't get up. I think something's wrong. And then that's the end of the chapter. And it's like, oh man, I don't think Oda's gonna be that cruel. I don't think he's gonna be that mean where it's like, Robin shows up and is like, where's Saul at? And then it immediately cuts to his deathbed. He's like, hooked up to a bunch of life support, like, oh, Robin, I'm so glad I got to see you in my last 5 minutes of life. Damn you, down D stairs. Down D stairs. Took Kuina and now it took Saul. Why can't anybody install banisters on these things, for God's sakes, At any rate, no, I don't think Oda's going to do that. I think it's going to be played for laughs. I think Oda honestly kind of just threw that in there as sort of like a cliffhanger, just to kind of throw some kind of like tension at the end of the chapter. I really think, I said it in the review, but I really think it is going to be something goofy. Like Saul was making a peanut butter jelly sandwich and he accidentally slipped on, something and he fell and he's like covered in jelly and like, oh no, Saul, you're bleeding. He's like, no, I'm good. I'm like, oh, okay. It's going to be something like that. But in the official Viz translation, they did give him the honorific doctor. Okay? And in Japanese, I believe they just referred to him as Saul Sensei. All right? So in Japanese, the honorific sensei you would use for like a medical doctor. You use like for like a physician. You would use it for like a school teacher or somebody like that, right? So being doctor in the sense of like a medical doctor, probably not. But in terms of like an academic, he would be referred to as Saul Sensei, okay? There actually is another honorific, I didn't know this, called Hakase. And Hakase is used for somebody that does just have like a PhD that's not in like the medical field. Like, let's say you had a professor of like mathematics or something at a university that was teaching, you would probably use Hakase rather than Sensei, maybe. I don't know. I don't live in Japan, but that's a difference I found out there. Now, I think probably what's happening here is that, remember, Saul is not from ELBAF originally. When he was talking about ELBAF to Robin way back in Ohara, he called them kind of barbaric. They're like the warmongering kind of giants that are living over there on ELBAF. Not every giant is from there. I would assume all giants would, like through their ancestral lineage, like their family trees, would eventually trace that back to ELBAF. Like if you go through like Saul's parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, eventually they would have come from ELBAF. ELBAF. But Saul was born in the South Blue, somewhere there. We don't know the island, but he was born in the South, ended up joining the Marines at some point, you know, rising to the rank of Vice Admiral, okay? And he kind of had this view of the ELBAF giants as like, oh, they're crazy, and they're always making war, and they're scary and barbaric, you know, I'm not like them, you know, that kind of stuff, right? So we do know that ELBAF is officially referred to as the War Land, and as Loki put it, that is where war began. You know, war was invented on ELBAF. Pretty crazy, right? Okay. Everybody was living in peace and harmony, and then one day two giants picked up some sticks and bonked each other over the head with them, and are like, hey, that's a lot of fun. Let's keep doing that. And then it just kind of blew out of proportion, right? So because I would imagine, you know, there are giants that are pretty intelligent, but, you know, that's not really something that's focused on in the world of ELBAF, you know, in the land of ELBAF. You know, the idea of, like, being an academic, probably not something super focused on. The wise village elder, you know, like Yorl and Jarl were. I guess Jarl is still alive, right? One of them is still alive anyway. I can't remember. Yorl and Jarl. There's Lord Mountainbeard, who's still alive. Lord Fallbeard is the one that got KO'd by Big Mom. So, you know, there's like life experience and battle experience, and there's giants that train the younger generation of giants in the art of battle and warfare. But in terms of like an academic, in terms of somebody like, I will teach you, you know, philosophy, or, you know, I will teach you language, or I will teach you mathematics, that probably doesn't have a lot of niches in ELBAF, I would assume. So just the fact that Saul is from a different place and he has been studying. Remember, they have all the books from Ohara, and Vegapunk did not take the books. He used his brain fruit to flip through the books and add that knowledge to his brain, kind of like as a storage system, and then he left. He didn't take all the Ohara books to Egghead. They're still there on ELBAF. They're in that giant library that we saw Saul and Vegapunk in, right? Okay. So I mean, Saul is on the run from the world government. You know, he was probably, you know, just declared to be dead by the Marines. So all of his titles and everything were taken from him. And he spent the last 22 years on ELBAF in hiding. You know, so it's like, what else are you going to do, right? Like, it's like, well, I guess I'll read. You know, I guess he'll read. And he started reading. Now, this is the cool thing because, like, the kind of education, the kind of stuff that was written in those books from Ohara, I'm sure there were plenty of books on, like, physics and mathematics and stuff like that, but the main focus of this was history and archaeology and, you know, studying, like, I guess anthropology, too, like, studying the history of humans and stuff on the planet in the One Piece world, right? So, you know, if you give me, I don't know, like, if you gave me 20 years and a giant pile of books on quantum physics, I don't know if I'm going to be able to understand that shit. I'd be like, okay, I can read this every day, but I'm not really sure about this, okay? History is a little bit different, though, because it's more of just like a collection of journals and stories and archaeological discoveries and things like that. Like, on this island, these people existed up until 200 years ago, until the government wiped them out. Or, you know, on this island, there's this very unique type of mushroom that makes your body glow, you know, yellow or something like that. Like a glowing light bulb shroom or something. And so those are the kind of books that Saul has been reading for like the last 20-something years. So while he is not as educated properly as like Clover would have been or Olvia would have been, obviously, he knows a lot more than like any other giant on the island. So every other giant is actually like, whoa, you're like a smart guy. We're gonna call you Dr. Saul, PhD, Dr. Saul Sensei. And Saul is like, no, I'm not really that smart. I just read some books. You know how to read? I'm sure, okay, I'm sure some giants know how to read. Can Dorian Broggy read? Like, I don't know, because, like, look, it's like, you know, could Vikings read? Some of them couldn't. Most of them probably couldn't, exactly. I would probably argue, you know? It's like, the way of life in ELBAF is, like, you fight. And that's the kind of life experience that you get. You go to war. That's what you do, okay? Like, I'm just saying, like, when we were at ELBAF in Big Mom's backstory, I didn't see a lot of giants breaking open books and, like, reading stuff, you know? Hyrudin was training with Raiden, and you saw Stanson eating some, like, potato chips in the background. You know what I mean? I didn't see anybody. I'm sure there's a school. I'm sure you learn basic stuff, like how to, like, language and how to speak and things like that, you know, basic shit. But when it comes to like higher academia, I don't know. Gerd is a doctor. Okay, that is something. Gerd is a doctor, so maybe did she learn how to be a doctor on ELBAF, or did she travel the world to learn how to be a doctor? There have to be doctors on ELBAF, okay? It's a warfaring nation of giants, okay? What happens if a giant breaks a leg or an arm or gets some grievous wound? Are they just going to be like, well, you broke a leg, say hi to Odin in Valhalla for me, comrade? You know, like, no, it's like, okay, we can learn how to set a bone and, you know, stitch up some wounds if they're pretty bad. So the medical doctors exist on ELBAF. Are they as good or as well trained as like Kureha? Like, would they be able to cure like really devastating illnesses? Would they be really great at like surgery like Law would be or something like that? Probably not on that level, no. Chopper could probably teach them some things, honestly. But they would have to have somebody that at least knows how to like set broken bones and stitch up wounds and, you know, keep infection away. You know, like that would have to be at least something, right? Okay. So yeah, I'm not saying the giants are stupid. I'm just saying that Saul, being an academic in the ways of history and anthropology and stuff, would be well outside most giants' wheelhouses, and they would probably look at him as just like, whoa, you know stuff about history, you know. And also, Saul can't go anywhere. He can't leave the island. If he leaves the island and he's kind of obvious, you know, he's a giant. If he's just walking around the world, people are going to notice him. He's not exactly low-key, and they're just going to be like, wait a minute, hold on a second. That's Jaguar D. Saul. He used to be a vice admiral. We thought he was dead. Like, if the Marines see him, that's going to be a problem, okay? So, you know, nothing else for him to do. Hang out on ELBAF, read some books, and, yeah, and we see him during Egghead. So, his overall appearance really has not changed that much. Granted, we do not see his face, but we see him just kind of lounging around on the shore of ELBAF, listening to Vegapunk's message, laughing about it, like, Dara, she. And he's dressing in, like, the same outfit he did way back at Ohara, like, t-shirt and shorts. He still has his cowboy hat, you know. Maybe he has some scars on his face and everything. Maybe he has some burn marks and whatever. His whole body was kind of wounded after Ohara, but we see his skin and his arms and stuff like that, and he doesn't look horribly disfigured, so he's probably fine, right? He probably basically looks the same. I mean, the general idea is that Aokiji used the technique Ice Time Capsule on Saul, because maybe Aokiji just did. I feel like Aokiji definitely had the potential to kill him. Like, if Aokiji wanted to kill him, he could have killed him, right? But maybe Aokiji was like, okay, I don't want to kill him, but I also just can't let him go, so I'm going to give the impression that I froze him, okay? So I'm going to use Ice Time Capsule, and there's a possibility he could die from this, and there's a possibility he can survive from this if his luck is good enough, kind of thing. So I'm just going to leave it up to fate at this point, right? And then, you know, the same thing with Aokiji letting Robin escape. You know, I'll allow you to leave, but I'm not helping you after this, okay? So it did set the precedence that Aokiji was like, all right, I'll freeze Saul. I'm not going to straight up kill him. I'm going to give him a fighting chance, but, you know, it's still kind of up to fate to decide. Kind of the same thing with Robin. I'm going to let you go, get you to the next island, but beyond that, I'm not helping you, and if I see you again, I'm going to bring you in. You know, that's how it's going to go, right? So that's what happened there. So he was on a burning island at the time, and we actually did see the Tree of Knowledge fall down, so it would be really, I think, poetic if Saul was, like, frozen solid, and then the giant tree falls down, and then it falls close enough to him that the branches of the Tree of Knowledge burn away and melt the ice, and then that's how he was freed, okay? And then he got away. Maybe he did get some burns in the process, but he was able to get away from Ohara, okay? He did build a raft, if I remember correctly. He built a raft because he was trying to get off Ohara anyway, and he didn't end up using it because, you know, the whole thing with the Buster Call and Cypher Pole 9 and Olvia and Robin was happening. So maybe, you know, after the events of all that, you know, Olvia's dead, Clover is dead, Island is burning down, most of the scholars are dead, Robin escaped, Aokiji's gone, so, you know, Saul breaks out and he's just like, okay, maybe he managed to make it to the shore where there was that raft that he had. I don't think the raft was destroyed. I don't think it was destroyed. I think he made one. It was a really shitty raft, but it might have been good enough. He could have just grabbed a log and just, you know, like, paddled his way to victory. Paddled your way out of the Buster Call on Ohara? That's a paddling. So he was able to get away from there and eventually make all the way to ELBAF, which Ohara was in the West Blue, which does border the new world where ELBAF was located. So they were in the same sphere, or like half sphere of the world to enter, the Grand Line and find ELBAF. So that was feasible for him to do that, right? So yeah, I think that all makes sense. He was able to make it out of there. I don't think it's so ridiculous he was able to escape from all that nonsense. So next chapter, whenever that'll be out, I don't know. There was something earlier this week that there was a emergency 2-week break and everyone was freaking out. And then yesterday, people were like, well, that was an error. There's not really a 2-week break. But it's Wednesday, and I don't think the spoilers for the next chapter are still out or not out yet. So it's just like, I don't know if there's going to be a chapter this week. No, they're not out. So it's really weird for spoilers not to be out on a Wednesday when the chapter's coming out, usually like, Friday-ish, so like, I don't know if there's going to be a chapter this week. I don't know how this is working, okay? But anyway, in the next chapter, whenever that'll be, I think it's going to be revealed. We're going to see Saul, and Saul's going to be like, oh, I'm fine. I just tripped a little bit. I'm good, though. And maybe the giants are like, okay, Dr. Saul, just be careful. We need your brilliant mind. And he's like, okay, whatever, and then they say, oh, the great Eric is arriving. The Straw Hats are here. And then Saul is like, oh, man, Robin's going to be here. What if Saul fell down because he was nervous about Robin being there? Because, Robin is a little nervous about seeing Saul, and she had her haircut and everything, and maybe she's like, oh, man, this is going to be it's going to be a happy reunion, but it might be a little bit awkward, too. Like, Saul, I thought you were dead, kind of thing, right? So, maybe Saul was busy trying to be like, oh man, Robin's gonna be here. Oh man, I gotta wear my nicest suit and everything. And he trips and he falls or some shit. I don't know. Like, maybe it's something like that. But he's gonna be fine. We're gonna see him. And then, like, I don't even know if we probably won't get their reunion in the very next chapter. Because Saul is, I'm assuming, up in the library area, which is probably part of the treasure tree Adam. I'm going to want to say Yggdrasil because it's Yggdrasil, but it's Adam. It's the treasure tree Adam. So he's probably up in the village somewhere. So the great Eric is going to have to dock at a port, maybe even the same port where Shanks was with the little tavern kind of place. And then they're going to have to make their way inland and then like over the underworld, up the ladder, and then up to the upper echelons and the canopies of the tree. And then maybe that's where Saul is, or maybe Saul will come down to the lower level. I'm not really sure how this is going to go down. I'm feeling like we're going to see Saul in the next chapter, but we're not going to get the reunion yet. That's going to be something that's not going to be waiting until like the end of the arc, but it's going to be a couple of more chapters until we get to that point. Okay, yeah. In fact, I'm curious if Robin is going to meet Saul before the Straw Hats are reunited or after. I feel like it's going to be before. I feel like, Robin's going to meet Saul in the village, and then eventually Luffy ends up in the village, and then eventually the rest of the Straw Hats, like Sanji's group, end up in the village, and that's where everybody, coalesces. Oh, what if... I don't know if this makes sense or not, but the whole idea is that Loki has his chains, and he's like, hey, there's a key up there in the village somewhere, go and find it. And Luffy hasn't really said yes to that yet, but he's probably going to go try to find the key and free Loki, because that's kind of moving the plot along, right? So what if Luffy goes up to the village? What if Saul has the key? What if Saul is like, oh, Saul, you're the smartest of the giants. You're the most brilliant man here. You'll be able to hide this key somewhere really good. And Saul is like, I don't know if I'm trusted with that level of responsibility, right? I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, though, because you feel like the key would probably be given to, like, whoever the current ruler is of ELBAF, because, King Harald was killed. I'm thinking he is dead. Now, the reasons for his death might be greatly exaggerated, okay? Like, maybe Loki killed him and stole the fruit. Maybe he died for some other reason, or maybe he was evil and Loki killed him because he was evil, like a Mad King situation. But somebody has to be ruling over ELBAF. I mean, that happened 6 years ago. That was 6 years ago that Loki was imprisoned for this whole altercation, this incident involving the king and the devil fruit and all that stuff. So there has to be somebody calling the shots, you know what I mean? Maybe it is Jarl, maybe it is like the Mountain Beard dude, but he's like 400 years old. Maybe he's like the interim king, but it's been 6 years. I feel like, I was like, okay, the king died, and one of his sons killed him, so Loki can't be the king. I guess, wouldn't that make Hiruden the king? See, that's the weird thing. Maybe Hiruden didn't want it. Maybe Hiruden was just like, I don't want to be the king. I don't want to be the king. I want to be a pirate. So maybe he refused the call to action or whatever. part of the hero's journey or some shit, and went off to sea and been the pirate, but now he also hangs out in ELBAF every now and then. You know what I mean? So, you know, Hyrudin would be the king. If not, somebody else has to be the king. Maybe there's another child. I mean, Harold probably had a lot of kids, you know what I mean? I don't think it's just Hyrudin and Loki. I'm sure there was other offspring that he sired and stuff like that. So maybe one of them, or maybe Hyrudin and Loki have an older brother, and the older brother we don't know about, and that they're the king right now, because the current ruler of ELBAF has, like, not been mentioned. So they would most likely have the key to Loki's chains, if anybody. I don't think Saul would, but at any rate, I mean, Saul would have information. Vegapunk didn't really get in a great opportunity to tell everybody about all the stuff involving the Ancient Kingdom, because it was kind of in a, it was like a major battle going on at Egghead. So, like, one thing, for example, like Egghead, at Egghead, Vegapunk would definitely know the name of the Ancient Kingdom. You know, the kingdom, the reason why Clover got shot. Like, Vegapunk should have known that. Okay, but he never got a chance to mention it, although even in his message he didn't mention it, so who knows, maybe he doesn't know. But anyway, I feel like Saul, if it was written down in, like, Clover's journal or diary or whatever, you know, Clover, like, entry, year 1507. The Ancient Kingdom's name is blah, 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 blah. You know, like, maybe, and then, you know, Saul reads that, and he's like, oh, that's what it was called the whole time. Okay. You know, I feel like there's some information that Saul could relay to Rob. And also, Lilith is there, so Lilith is Vegapunk. Okay, so Vegapunk is still alive, Lilith is there, so Saul and Lilith could have a conversation about something. You know what I mean? And just like, wait a minute, you're Vegapunk? That was... he looked a little different last time he was here. He was an old man with a giant head. Yeah, now I'm like a 25-year-old sexy lady. It's like, okay, you know, that's just, I don't judge. All right, so anyway, I'm just going... There it is. That'd be funny. You know, so, yeah, this is interesting. This is an interesting setup for Saul being reintroduced into the story and all that. I think Saul's going to pal around with the Straw Hats for this arc. Maybe we'll even start getting some... Because every time we have a story arc, there's always a couple of people that pal around with the Straw Hats, and people are always like, oh, Yamato's going to join the Straw Hats. Bonnie's going to join the Straw Hats. Maybe this arc will be Saul's going to join the Straw Hats. Okay, it's like, I'd be okay. I'd be 100% fine with that. Most of the time that happens in a story arc, it's like, is Carrot gonna join the Straw Hats? I'd be all right with that. Yamato, Kuma and Bonnie, that's also fine for them to join. Is Saul joining? Yeah, I don't think he will, but, like, that's fine too. So Saul could maybe help them fight against the main threat of ELBAF, which is probably not going to be Loki, because I think it's too obvious. It's too obvious it's going to be Loki. Loki's going to be freed, and then he's going to be like, I am free now! And then Luffy's like, you're not going to destroy the world? I thought you were going to destroy the world. Hey, you know, who's the one that's the sun god here? And Luffy's like, that's true. I guess you're the sun god, even though Luffy's the sun god too, but he doesn't really know that, right? So I don't know. There's going to be a twist with Loki that's coming up, so just pay attention to that. At any rate, that's a quick video. Just wanted to talk about Saul being there, being a doctor. Good for him. He got his PhD. Great for him. So good luck to him. Maybe he's the teacher. Maybe he's educating the giants. You know, he literally is just like, there's nothing else for him to do. So he's just like, all right, I'll be holding classes in the Great Tree Library. Come on in and we'll talk. And it's like, okay. And then he's educating the giants. There you go. You know, that could be cool. All right. Good to see. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Teching, signing out. Later, everyone.